The house still smells like coffee and lemon oil in the mornings, the way it did before I learned what it almost cost me. There is a small velvet box on the kitchen counter today, and inside it are 2 silver oak leaves. This afternoon, someone is going to pin them to my collar and call me commander for the first time. Marisol's casserole dish is drying in the rack by the sink because it is Sunday, and on Sundays, she cooks whether I ask her to or not. I stood in this kitchen this morning and ran my hand along the counter, and I let myself remember that none of this was supposed to be mine anymore. Not the counter, not the kitchen, not the house. It almost went another way. 11 months ago, the woman who cleaned this house stood in my driveway, holding my own key in her hand, and begged me not to walk into it. But let me back up a little. 7 months, 4 days. That is how long my destroyer was gone, and I counted it the way sailors do, in watches and in time zones and in emails that got shorter as the months got longer. We came home to Norfolk on a Tuesday in July, 2 days early, because a canceled port visit had compressed the schedule and nobody argues with an early homecoming. The pier was a wall of noise and balloons and homemade signs, kids on shoulders. A petty officer from my department ran the length of the fence line and jumped into her husband's arms, and half the ship cheered. Nobody was there for me. I told myself the story you tell yourself. He did not know we were early. He is at work. He is buying flowers somewhere and cursing the traffic on the bridge tunnel. I had called Craig when we cleared the Seaboy. Voicemail. I called when the brow went over. Voicemail. You've reached Craig Delaney. Leave it short. I left it short. Then I counted, because counting is what I do when I do not want to feel something yet. 13 calls over 2 days, all unanswered. Texts delivered and read and not returned. Since May, his messages had gone thin, the way a rope goes thin, strand by strand, before it parts. You should know what that house was to understand what came later. I bought it in 2019, 2 years into the marriage. With $62,000 I had saved across 2 sea tours, eating in the wardroom and driving a 10-year-old truck while other people my age bought boats. Craig's name went on the deed beside mine because that is what marriage means, or what I thought it meant. It was a brick colonial with a crooked maple in the front yard and a kitchen window that caught the afternoon sun. And every time I came home from sea, the first thing I did, before I unpacked a single bag, was stand in that kitchen and let the house tell me I was back. I loaded my sea bags into the truck I had left in long-term storage, and I drove home to Chesapeake with the windows down, because after 7 months of recycled ship air, you want to smell cut grass and hot asphalt, even in July. Our street looked the way it always looked. Sprinklers, a kid's bike on its side in a yard, and then my house, and the porch light burning at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and 2 cars in my driveway that were not my husband's. One of them belonged to my mother-in-law. Marisol was standing at the end of the driveway. She had worked for us for 4 years by then, every Tuesday and Friday, a quiet, careful woman who ironed pillowcases nobody asked her to iron and remembered how I took my coffee after the first week. She was not in her work clothes. She was standing on the concrete in her church shoes with her purse over her arm, and she was holding my spare house key flat in her open hand, like something she needed to give back before it burned her. "Ma'am," she said, "don't go home." I remember almost laughing. "Marisol, I am home." She shook her head slowly, and her eyes were wet, and she pressed the key into my hand and folded my fingers over it. "I can't be part of it, ma'am," she said. "Part of what?" She would not answer. She looked at the house, and she looked at me, and she said it again, barely above a whisper. "Please, don't go in there tonight. Come back tomorrow. The Navy spends years teaching you what to do with the cold drop a body produces when something is wrong. You do not spend it. You bank it. You observe. You collect facts. You keep your voice level, and you move." I looked past her at my own living room window, and through the glass I could see the dining table. Our dining table, the one Craig and I had argued about paying too much for, set for 8 people. Cloth napkins, candles, the good china that lived in the hutch and came out twice a year. My husband's car was not in the driveway. His mother's was. "Thank you, Marisol," I said. And I meant it. And I walked up the path I had paid for, in the uniform I had worn for 7 months of someone else's ocean, and I opened my own front door without knocking. Every voice inside went silent. 8 faces turned toward me at once. My mother-in-law, Lorraine, at the head of my table, mid-toast, a glass of white wine frozen halfway to her smile. My sister-in-law, Tessa, standing over a dish with a serving spoon in her hand. Tessa's husband, Doug, reaching for bread. A man in a golf shirt whose card I would later learn said Brett Kowalski, residential specialist, An older man in a summer suit with a leather folder squared in front of him like a place setting, and a couple I had never seen in my life, a man and a woman in their 40s, sitting in my chairs, drinking from my wedding china with the careful posture of people being sold something expensive. It was Tessa who spoke first. The serving spoon dipped, and her voice came out small. "You weren't supposed to see this." Nobody moved. Somewhere behind me, through the open door, I heard Marisol's car start. Lorraine recovered the way Lorraine always recovered, fast and smooth, like water closing over a stone. She set down her glass, and she smiled at me with her mouth only. "Elise, sweetheart, you're early." She said early the way you would say trespassing. "We were going to tell you, dear, after everything's settled." "Tell me what?" The man and woman I did not know had gone very still, the way innocent people do when they realize the floor under a transaction is moving. The woman looked from me to Lorraine. "I thought you said the owner was overseas," she said quietly. "Permanently." "The owner," I said, "is standing in her own dining room." The man in the summer suit opened the leather folder with a little sigh, as if I were a scheduling problem. I would learn his name that night, too. Alden Pierce, the family's lawyer, which is what Lorraine called him, though I never once saw a document that had the whole family's interests inside it. "Mrs. Delaney," Pierce said to me, and even that was a choice, because I had never taken the name. "This doesn't have to be uncomfortable. The sale closes Friday. The remaining documents need one signature." He turned the folder toward me on the cloth and set a pen on top of it, black and heavy, and slid it across my own table like a bill for a dinner I had not eaten. "Sign the last pages," Lorraine said pleasantly, "and this stays a pleasant evening." The sale closes Friday. I want to tell you I felt rage. What I felt was colder and more useful. I felt myself go to general quarters. My hands did not shake. I did not raise my voice, because a voice you raise is a voice you have surrendered. "Whose signature is already in that folder?" I asked. Pierce blinked. "Your attorney-in-fact executed the listing and the purchase contract under power of attorney," he said. "All perfectly ordinary." "My husband sold my house." "Your husband," Lorraine said, "made a family decision. You were unreachable, dear. Deployed." She said, deployed the way she had said early. I looked around my dining room, and that is when I saw the walls. The photographs were gone. The wedding picture over the sideboard. The frame with my father in his flight deck jersey, 1978, grinning into the wind. The shadow box with my grandmother's thimbles. Gone, all of it. And the nails patched and painted over so fresh I could smell it under the candles. The room had been staged. My whole marriage had been staged. I did not sign. I picked up the pen, and I set it down on Pierce's side of the folder, and I took the agent's card out of the little brass holder he had brought into my house, and I asked the couple politely, because none of this was their fault, "When is the closing?" "Friday," the man said. 10 o'clock. "Enjoy your dinner," I said to the room, and I walked through my own kitchen and opened the door to the garage, because I needed to see it before anyone could arrange my face for me. Boxes. 2 neat walls of them, taped and labeled in marker. Storage. E. My dress blues folded into cardboard between bath towels. My framed commissioning certificate face down under a bread machine. 7 months of my absence, packed and stacked and priced to move. They had not just sold my house, they had been erasing me from it. I stood in that garage for 1 full minute by my watch. Behind me, through the door, I could hear the dinner, restarting in pieces, a fork, a murmur, Lorraine's hostess laugh coming back up like a generator after a power cut. Nobody came to find me. Not one chair moved. I took 3 photographs of the boxes with my phone, wide, middle, close, the way you document damage after a collision at sea, and I noted the time. Then I carried my sea bags back to the truck, and I drove to a motel by the interstate, and I did not cry, because the Navy taught me that panic is a luxury and a list is a weapon. I wrote down every name at that table from memory, in order, the way I would log a watch. Lorraine Delaney, Tessa, Doug. Brett Kowalski, residential specialist, Alden Pierce, 2 buyers, first name unknown, called each other Hollister. Table set for 8, 1 seat empty, 1 seat empty. I looked at that line a long time. Craig had not even come to watch. I slept 4 hours, the way you learn to at sea, and I woke before the alarm with the plan already standing at attention. Not revenge, sequence, first the document, because everything downstream of a poisoned document is poisoned, then counsel, then the money. I ironed my uniform on a motel towel, and I remember thinking, calmly, almost gratefully, that the people at that table had made one large mistake among their many small ones. They had built their entire Friday around the assumption that I would still be at sea. And the sea, as it does, had changed the schedule. At 0730 the next morning, I was standing at the counter of the Navy Legal Assistance Office with my copy of a document I had signed 8 months earlier, in November, in a gray cubicle, with a lieutenant walking me through it, page by page. Anyone who is deployed knows the ritual, the will, the allotments, the power of attorney so someone can register your car and pay the roof guy while you are gone. Mine named Craig. General and durable, the standard package. Except that it was not quite standard, and the reason it was not standard was sitting in the same building. Lieutenant Renata Vogel was younger than me and sharper than she let people see, and she remembered me before she remembered the file, which tells you something about how she does her job. When I told her what I had walked into, she did not gasp or shake her head. She typed. Then she turned her monitor toward me, and there it was, the scanned retained original, and she scrolled to page 9. Page 9 had handwriting on it, mine and Craig's. One paragraph added at the table in that gray cubicle because I had insisted, because I had watched what an open-ended power of attorney did to a chief I served with in 2019. The paragraph excluded the marital residence. No sale, no transfer, no mortgage, no encumbrance. 2 sets of initials, his and mine, and the notary's stamp half over the ink. "Ma'am," Vogel said, and her voice had gone very even. "This page says the house cannot be sold under this authority. If a title company is sitting on a version of this document with a different page 9, that is not a misunderstanding. That is tampering. Can they close Friday?" "Not if a judge sees both pages side by side before 10 o'clock Friday morning." She was already printing. She stamped the packet with the office's certification, retained original on file, and she wrote a name and number on a sticky note and pressed it onto the folder like a corpsman taping a field dressing. "Miriam Kessler, civil litigation. She has stopped closings before. Call her from the parking lot." I called her from the parking lot. Miriam Kessler's office was 3 flights up over a sandwich shop downtown, and the whole place smelled like paper and toner and old coffee. And I have never felt safer in a civilian building in my life. She read the retained original twice. She read my notes from the motel notepad. Then she took her glasses off. "We don't have to win the whole war by Friday," she said. "We only have to stop the clock. You stop a clock like this with 3 things, the original document, the money, and a witness. We have the first one. Let's go find the other 2. The money did not hide well. Money never does, once someone with a subpoena starts asking. But the first thing her paralegal pulled that afternoon was not a bank record. It was a company. Delaney Home Legacy LLC, registered with the state in April, 3 months before my ship turned for home. Registered agent, Alden Pierce. Sole member, Lorraine Delaney. 2 months before anyone listed anything, my mother-in-law had already built the box to carry my house away in. The listing itself had never touched the open market. A pocket listing, Kowalski's specialty, quiet and off the books, signed 6 weeks earlier by power of attorney. The purchase contract the same. Craig's name, Pierce's cover letters, Lorraine's new company waiting downstream of all of it, and a closing date chosen for a week when I was supposed to still be 4,000 miles away. That evening, I called my husband. Once. He answered on the 5th ring, and his voice was small, in a way I had never heard it. Small like a boy standing outside a principal's office. "Elise, you sold our house, Craig." A long breath. "Mom said you'd be taken care of. There's a plan. The money goes into the family trust, and we start fresh someplace smaller. She said you'd land at a new duty station anyway, and..." He stopped. "I didn't read every page, Elise. I didn't want to fight." "You didn't want to fight," I repeated, "so you gave them mine." Silence on the line. In 4 years of marriage, I had heard Craig talk his way around contractors, around his boss, around me. I had never before heard him have nothing at all. "Were you going to tell me?" I asked. "Or was I going to find a family eating dinner in my house?" "I was going to be there Friday," he said, which was not an answer, and we both knew it, and I told him goodnight because my mother raised me to end a call before I said something I could not take back. I sat on the edge of a motel bed with the retained original on my knees, and I understood the shape of the thing at last. This war had an author. It was not my husband. My husband was only the pen she had picked up, the way Pierce's pen had been slid across my table, and the author had a deadline, Friday at 10 o'clock, and I had a stamped page 9 and 36 hours. What I did not have yet was a witness. Thursday morning, the hearing was set for 2 p.m, an emergency motion on a judge's crowded docket, and Kessler was honest with me over the phone about what we had. "The original is strong," she said, "but Pierce will stand up and call the recorded version a conformed copy, a clerical error, an innocent substitution. Judges have heard that song before. Some of them hum along. I want more than paper, Elise. Paper against paper is an argument. Paper plus a person is a case." At 9:40 that morning, her receptionist put a call through from a number nobody recognized, a woman's voice, quiet, formal, calling from what turned out to be a bench at a bus stop. "My name is Marisol Ferreira. I clean for the Harmon house. I have some papers, and I need to know if they can help, ma'am, because if they can, I will bring them, and if they cannot, I would like to know that too, because either way, I am not keeping them anymore." She arrived at 11 in the same church shoes, carrying a grocery bag folded over twice at the top. Inside the bag was a manila folder, and inside the folder, kept flat and clean the way she kept everything, was the reason I am telling you this story from my own kitchen. In June, while I was somewhere south of the equator, Marisol had been told the family was helping the Harmons move. She was given lists, deep clean for showings, boxed the photographs. And then, one Friday, Lorraine had handed her a stack of papers and pointed her to the shredder in the study, and something in Marisol had balked. She was 54 years old. She had cleaned houses since she was 19. She knew the difference between trash and evidence, the way a sailor knows weather. "Ma'am asked me to burn papers," she told us, sitting straight-backed at Kessler's conference table with her purse in her lap. "I don't burn things I don't understand." Item by item, the folder came apart under Kessler's hands, and the room got very quiet. A photocopy of the power of attorney. Page 9, clean, typeset, no handwriting anywhere on it. The version the world was supposed to see, caught halfway between a printer and a shredder. A staging invoice from a company I had never heard of, billed to Delaney Home Legacy, LLC. And a half sheet of cream notepaper, the kind Lorraine kept by her telephone like it was still 1985, with a list in her looping, unmistakable hand. Third line from the top. All military items out before buyer visits. Evidence, real evidence. Kept safe in a grocery bag by the one person in that house who owed me nothing. "Mrs. Ferreira," Kessler said carefully, "would you be willing to sign a sworn statement about where these came from and what you saw and heard in that house in June? I have to tell you plainly, they may fire you for it." Marisol looked at her the way you look at someone who has asked whether water is wet. "They told me Mrs. Harmon knew," she said. "They told me she was being transferred overseas for good, and she knew all about the sale. I cleaned that woman's home for 4 years. I ironed the pillowcases when she was at sea, because she likes the house nice when she comes home. I knew she didn't know." She smoothed the folder flat with one hand. "Where do I sign?" While the affidavit was being typed, she gave us one thing more, and it was the thing that put the nail in. In the last week of June, standing on the back porch with a watering can, she had heard Lorraine on the telephone through the kitchen window. One side of a conversation, calm as a garden party. "Once it closes on Friday, she'll have no reason to come back here at all. Let the Navy keep her." Kessler closed the folder, and she looked at me, and for the first time since I had walked into her office, she smiled like a lawyer at 2 a.m. who has just found the missing page. "Now we have a hearing," she said. The money finished the picture that same afternoon, in time to be stapled to the motion. The subpoenaed statements came back from the bank at 1:15, and Kessler's paralegal laid the pages out on the table like a hand of cards. $41,500, gone from the joint savings account Craig and I had fed for 4 years. Not in one theft. In 3 quiet transfers. $12,000 in the second week of May, $14,500 at the end of May, $15,000 in the middle of June, every one of them landing in the operating account of Delaney Home Legacy, LLC. The memo line said staging in advance, as if my savings had volunteered. $41,500. Moved while I was standing watch in another hemisphere, keeping other people's sons and daughters off the rocks. And one more declaration slid in just before the courthouse doors, from a woman named Grace Yun, the escrow officer handling Friday's closing. Kessler had reached her at noon and asked one question. "Which power of attorney does your file hold?" Ms. Yun, who had done nothing wrong and clearly intended to keep it that way, sent a certified copy within the hour. Its page 9 was typeset, clean, and bare. No handwriting, no initials, no exclusion. 2 documents that should have been twins. Only one of them had my handwriting on it. Pierce reached for comment by fax and by phone, used the words "conformed copy" once, and then stopped taking calls altogether. There is a particular silence that guilty paper makes, and by 3 o'clock Thursday, everything on his side of the case had gone that kind of quiet. The courtroom was small and wood-paneled and smelled like floor wax, and it was a civil courtroom, not a family one, which mattered to me in a way I find hard to explain. I did not come there as a wife. I came there as an owner. I wore my service dress blues because Kessler asked me to come straight from the base, and because I had earned every thread of them. Lorraine arrived in pearls, composed as a portrait, with Tessa small and gray behind her. Pierce sweated through the collar of the summer suit at counsel table, and in the last row, alone, having driven himself, sat my husband, looking at his hands. Judge Cynthia Marsh was 60 years old and unhurried, with reading glasses pushed up into steel-colored hair, and she ran her courtroom the way a good captain runs a bridge, quietly, completely. Kessler put the 2 page 9s up side by side on the projector. The retained original from the Navy Legal Assistant's office, with the handwritten paragraph and the 2 sets of initials and the notary's seal biting into the ink, and the title company's version, smooth and bare as a showroom floor. Judge Marsh looked at them for a long moment over her glasses. "Counsel," she said to Pierce, "one of these documents is a forgery of the other. The court is not confused about which." Pierce stood and said the words, "conformed copy," an administrative substitution, and no intent to mislead, and the judge let him finish every sentence, which was somehow worse for him than being interrupted. Then Marisol took the stand, in a pressed navy blue church dress, and put her hand on the Bible like she meant it. She told it plainly: the boxing of the photographs, the lists, the shredder, and the papers that never reached it. When Kessler asked her why she had kept them, she folded her hands on the rail. "Because somebody was going to need the truth, Your Honor," she said, "and truth doesn't keep itself." Judge Marsh's mouth moved, just barely at that. Pierce, unwisely, tried cross. He asked whether she had been paid to testify. Marisol looked at him the way she looked at a stain that thought it was going to survive her. "Sir, I lost my job yesterday for being here," she said. "You cannot afford what this is costing me." The last piece went in at 4:20 in the afternoon. Discovery had reached Lorraine's telephone records that morning, and among the produced messages was a text sent in June to my husband's number. Judge Marsh read it aloud herself, into a room so silent I could hear the air conditioning breathe. "Once it closes Friday, she'll have no reason to stay. Let the Navy keep her." The judge lowered the page and took off her glasses, and she looked at Lorraine for 3 full seconds. And my mother-in-law, for the first time in the years I had known her, looked down. In the last row, my husband made a sound I had never heard from him. Quiet, involuntary, the sound of a man hearing his own mother price him out loud. He had known about the sale. I believe to this day he had not seen that message for what it was until a judge read it to him in open court. Some men learn what they married into from a stranger's mouth in a public room under oath. He put his face in his hands and kept it there. The rulings came from the bench, in a voice you could have navigated by. The closing set for Friday at 10 o'clock was enjoined. The recorded power of attorney was stricken, the listing and purchase contract executed under it declared void as to the residence. The $41,500 was ordered restored to the joint account within 30 days, pending a full accounting, and the conduct of Mr. Alden Pierce, the court said, folding her glasses closed with a click, would be referred to the state bar and to the Commonwealth's attorney, along with, and here she looked at Lorraine again, any person shown to have directed it. The clerk stamped the order. The closing 1 day away died on the page. Outside, on the marble steps, in the flat gold light of a July evening, Kessler asked me if I felt like celebrating, and I gave her the only true answer I had. "This was never about winning," I said. "It was about coming home to my own life." My heart did not soar, standing there. It settled. There is a difference, and I have come to believe the difference is everything. What came after was slower and quieter, the way real endings are. I filed for divorce in August. Craig did not contest it. Tessa wrote me a letter in the fall, 4 pages, apologizing in the careful, curated way of someone who has read about apologies. And I answered it with 2 lines thanking her and wishing her well, which was both the least and the most I could do. Lorraine never wrote. Lorraine, I am told, refers to the whole matter at her club as a misunderstanding about paperwork. Some people would rather keep the story than the family, and there is no court order on earth that can fix that. There was no shouting, no lawyers performing at each other, just a conference room and a settlement that gave me the house, the restored savings, and my own name back, unencumbered. The criminal referral ground forward the way those things do. The bar took Pierce's license by spring, and the Commonwealth's attorney let Lorraine's lawyer negotiate her out of a trial in exchange for restitution, supervision, and a public record that says in plain words what she did. I want to be honest with you about the cost, because this is the part the movies get wrong. I would have signed the papers myself if he had asked. That is the thing I have turned over 1,000 times at this kitchen table. If Craig had ever once sat down across from me and said, "My mother is drowning. We need to sell the house. I need your help," I would have grieved and grumbled and signed, because that is what you do for a person you love. The court could return the money. No court could return the man I thought I married. What ended my marriage was never the sale. It was learning that when his family sat down to erase me, my husband's only contribution was to be somewhere else. He came to the driveway in March. No lawyer, no mother, no folder. He stood where Marisol had stood, and he apologized, and to his credit, it was for the true thing. "I told myself staying out of it wasn't the same as doing it," he said. "I know better now. I'm sorry, Elise. Not about the house, about the silence." "Thank you," I said. "I believe you. And we are still done." He nodded, and he went, and I closed the door gently because I had learned by then that forgiveness is a door you are allowed to close. It just does not have to slam. Marisol never went back to cleaning for anyone else. She retired, officially, although you would not know it from my kitchen on Sundays. She sits in the chair by the window, and we eat her casserole off my grandmother's plates, which came out of a box in the garage labeled Storage E and went back on the shelf where they belong. When I tried once to thank her with something more than dinner, she waved me off with one hand and kept her eyes on her cards. "You came home," she said. "That's the payment." This afternoon, at the ceremony, a captain I have served with twice will pin 2 silver oak leaves on my collar, and the Navy will call me Commander Harmon, and the first hands I shake afterward will belong to a 55-year-old retired housekeeper sitting in the front row, in the seats they save for family. Because that is what she is. The people at that dinner table shared my name, some of them, and my table, all of them. Family turned out to be the woman standing in the driveway, holding my key, telling me the truth. For the first time since that Tuesday, I will look at a room full of people in my house tonight and feel nothing but safe. If my story has taught you anything, let it be this. The people who love you show you in your absence, not just your presence. Watch what they guard for you when you are not in the room. Character is what a person does with someone else's power in their hands. And love, real love, is a housekeeper in church shoes, saying 5 hard words in a driveway because the truth needed somebody to carry it. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs reminding that quiet loyalty still exists and that walking into the truth beats living comfortably beside a lie. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done at that dining room door? Has someone unexpected ever stood up for you when your own family would not? I read every comment, and your stories stay with me. And if you want more stories about courage, justice, and hope, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because there is always another homecoming, and not all of them go the way they should. Thank you for spending this time with me. Wherever you are tonight, I hope your house is your own, your people are true, and your key still turns in the lock. The end.